Most organizations don't notice this immediately. At first, it looks like momentum, more content, faster turnaround, quicker execution, teams shipping things in hours that used to take weeks. And honestly, some of those gains are real. You can absolutely increase execution speed with AI. I've seen teams remove huge amounts of operational friction almost overnight. Drafting gets faster, research gets faster, production gets faster, decision cycles compress, the volume increases everywhere. But there's another pattern underneath it that I think the market is still misreading. Because at the same time, all this acceleration is happening, something else is happening inside a lot of organizations too. Something starts feeling slightly off, not louder, not necessarily worse, just less coherent. You can feel it before you can properly measure it. Everyone is producing more, but the center is getting harder to find. You see it in small ways at first. The work is moving, the tools are helping, but the message starts to feel less settled. And that's the part I think most people are underestimating. The current AI conversation is still heavily framed around productivity. How do we move faster? How do we reduce cost? How do we automate workflows? How do we increase output? So organizations are distributing AI capability across teams as quickly as possible. Marketing is using it one way. Sales is using it another. Ops has its own workflows. Founders are experimenting separately. Agencies are layering tools across delivery teams. Everyone is accelerating locally. But local acceleration is not the same as organizational progress. Those are two different things, because execution speed by itself does not create coherence. It exposes where the coherence was already there. And I think this is where a lot of companies are about to run into a much bigger problem than they expect. Because AI doesn't just help people execute, it helps them execute from whatever interpretation they already hold of the brand, the customer, the offer, the standard, and what good is supposed to mean. That's the real shift. If a company already has strong shared judgment, AI can become an extraordinary multiplier. The organization compounds faster because people are operating from aligned principles underneath the execution. But if the underlying judgment is fragmented, AI doesn't fix that. It makes the fragmentation move faster. And once you see that pattern, a lot of things suddenly start making more sense. Why organizations can produce more content while feeling less distinct. Why teams can become more active while leadership feels less clarity. Why AI adoption can increase while confidence in the organization's direction quietly decreases. Why some companies look productive from the outside, but internally feel harder and harder to steer. I've seen versions of this pattern before in systems environments where execution starts accelerating faster than the judgment underneath it. At first, the gains look incredible. Everything feels more responsive, more dynamic, more efficient. But eventually, the coordination costs start surfacing somewhere else. Not because the system slowed down, because different parts of the system started scaling different interpretations at the same time. That's the part people miss. AI is not automatically creating organizational intelligence. In a lot of cases, it's revealing whether organizational intelligence actually existed upstream in the first place. And I think many organizations are still measuring the wrong thing. They're measuring visible productivity, more output, more throughput, more assets, more activity. But they're not measuring signal coherence. They're not asking, are we becoming more aligned as we scale this? Or are we becoming faster at expressing different interpretations of who we are, what we believe, what we prioritize, and how we operate? Because if those interpretations are fragmented, productivity does not compound, it fragments. And to be clear, I don't think this is fundamentally a tooling problem. Most organizations will try to solve this operationally first. Usually, that means more governance layers, more tools, more orchestration, more attempts to control the system from the outside. Some of that will matter, but I think the deeper issue sits underneath all of it. AI scales whatever judgment precedes it, which means the real constraint is no longer access to execution. The real constraint is whether there is enough shared judgment in place before execution starts multiplying. That's a very different problem, and you can already see the early symptoms appearing across the market. Organizations are becoming more productive without necessarily becoming more coherent, more active without becoming more authoritative, faster without becoming clearer. That's why I don't think the next competitor divide will simply be who uses AI. Most serious companies will use AI. The real divide will be which organizations can maintain coherence while execution speed explodes. Because once execution becomes abundant, coherence stops being a branding issue. It becomes an operating issue. I don't mean branding theatre or messaging polish. I mean operational coherence, shared interpretation, shared judgment, and the ability for people, systems, workflows, and AI-assisted decisions to keep reinforcing the same directional signal as scale increases. And if that layer is weak, AI doesn't hide weakness, it amplifies it. That's why I think a lot of organizations are about to discover something uncomfortable over the next few years. You can become extremely productive while the organization slowly becomes harder to align. And from the outside, those two things can look almost identical for a while, until the coordination costs start showing up everywhere. In positioning, decision making, execution quality, leadership trust, team alignment, market distinctiveness. The organization keeps moving, but the center gets harder to hold. And I think that's the real conversation that's starting to emerge underneath all the AI productivity hype. So I don't think the real question is, how do we get AI to produce more? But what exactly is becoming more productive, the organization or its fragmentation?